Joining us now, NBC News correspondent Erin Gilchrist in Tallahassee, Florida, New York Times reporter Matthew Goldstein, and New York Law School professor and former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Roiphe. First, let's go to the ground down there in Tallahassee. Erin, so nothing at all from Todd Blanche.
No, nothing at all today from Todd Blanche. We know that he had been somewhat active on social media this week leading up to this meeting, this interview with Ghislaine Maxwell and her legal team. He posted on social media that the goal here was really focused on the idea that if Ghislaine Maxwell had information about anyone, he said in his post, who has committed crimes, that the DOJ and the FBI will hear about it. He went on last night after that days-long meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell and her team to say that, in fact, the meeting had happened yesterday and that the DOJ would share additional information from the meetings once it deemed that was appropriate. As you noted, though, her attorney has come out a few times now and spoken to the media after these meetings all day yesterday. We think about 3 hours today the meeting lasted, and he said that he thought it was a productive session that they had with the Deputy Attorney General and other prosecutors from the DOJ. And he said that really the goal for them was about relief for his client. He said that he believes that Ghislaine Maxwell was treated unfairly, had an unfair trial that led up to her conviction, and that he said that he was trying to get some relief now. So I asked him, do you think the meeting you're having with Todd Blanche is going to result in some type of relief? And he said, we don't know how it's going to play out. But this was the first opportunity from his perspective that they really had an opportunity to talk to prosecutors from the federal government, that his client had an opportunity to talk to them and to share her side of the story. He said that she was truthful in his estimation and that is something that would continue to happen with her. I asked him in particular about the idea of a deal, something that he sort of referenced in some of his comments here. I said, are you hoping for a deal as a result of this conversation with Todd Blanche? And he said that he wouldn't comment on what they're hoping for right now. They really just wanted to make sure that Ghislaine Maxwell answered some questions. He says she answered those questions fully, did not take the fifth, did not suggest that she didn't want to answer a question throughout the entirety of yesterday and today in those meetings. And so, Katie, at this point, it still is yet to be seen what exactly it is that the federal government was hoping to get from a convicted felon who's in prison here in Tallahassee. At this point in the process, her attorney seemed to indicate that the process is going to continue to move forward from here. There is this House Oversight Committee hearing, rather deposition, that for which Ghislaine Maxwell has been subpoenaed. That's supposed to happen on August 11th of next month. Her attorney indicated that this meeting could be an indicator of whether they would accept that opportunity to speak to the House Oversight Committee in terms of actually answering questions or just taking the fifth in that meeting. And so this interaction with Ghislaine Maxwell and what she knows about Jeffrey Epstein is not over, despite the fact that these meetings here in Tallahassee seem to have ended at this point.
Okay, let me focus a little bit more on what the lawyer said outside of there, Rebecca. And he's claiming that she didn't get a fair trial, that she's being treated terribly, and this is the first time that anybody has spoken to her in order, I guess, for her to get more information out there. From following this trial, was there anything unusual, anything to substantiate this allegation from the lawyer?
I mean, there's nothing unusual. What's unusual is what's going on now. And, you know, I mean, we really rely on normal process to inform the public that things are going as they should be and that we should trust the outcome, because it's the process that allows us to understand that, you know, things are going normally. And everything seemed like it was going according to normal process until now, because we normally don't have these kind of interviews at this point after a conviction. And we also normally don't have these conducted by a political appointee who has direct ties to the president. In fact, Todd Blanche was also the president's personal attorney in his criminal trial in Manhattan. And so that makes him even less of an appropriate person to be conducting these sorts of interviews. Explain the
tension there, why it's uncomfortable that this man, who is now a DOJ official, why it is uncomfortable that he is interviewing her because he was also Donald Trump's criminal attorney.
Yeah, well, so first of all, we normally have these kinds of things, especially in politically charged cases, conducted by career prosecutors. We do that because career prosecutors are the least likely to have their own political ambitions or affiliations or any kind of loyalty. And so they're more likely to be fair and impartial. In this case, we have a political appointee. Just by the fact that he is the Deputy Attorney General, that means he has more skin in the game because he's obviously more closely attached to political actors. and he has political ambitions himself. Then secondly, making this even worse, this is not just any political appointee. This is a political appointee who was previously the president's personal attorney, which gives him an even more greater allegiance to the political actor whose interests could be implicated in this very case.
How much skepticism would you have if he came out and said Ghislaine Maxwell unveiled new evidence, new allegations that was going to allow us to pursue new threads in this investigation?
I'd be very skeptical, and
Why?
I think the public should be very skeptical because this is somebody who has a particular interest in the outcome of the case. He is so closely aligned and so loyal to the president.
What would his interest be?
His interest is in serving the president personally instead of what it should be as a deputy attorney general and as somebody who's conducting a prosecutorial interview like this, the interests of the public in justice. And there is nothing in this particular process to give us assurance that that's what he's actually doing here.
We have Tom Winter coming in with some interesting information about what needs to happen in these interviews to get a different sentence from DOJ. We're going to put a pin in that for just one moment because, Matthew, I want to talk about your reporting in the New York Times. The Epstein files, according to the Wall Street Journal, contain a number of references or instances where Donald Trump's name appears, which makes sense. He's known Epstein for years. We've seen images of him. He's been, quoted in glowing profiles of Epstein. Like, they were associates. We know that. It would make sense that his name would come up. What have you guys uncovered most recently?
I mean, in terms of the files, I don't want to talk about because it could be anything. There could be witness statements there just about, I saw Donald Trump at a party, and that may well be what is there. What we had is we have seen, though, we have not seen the actual letter that he wrote in this birthday book the Journal first wrote about. But we know there was a list of contributors, and he is on there as a list of contributors. We also have separately had other things that have not come out. Not what I would say anything is a smoking gun, but of course established more their ties. One is this book, his second book that came out, The Comeback, which came out in, I think it was October 1997. He signed it, Jeff, you're the greatest, and just signed it Donald, a very personal kind of thing. And actually, he gave him the book the very same month the book came out. We had a fun picture actually with him and Epstein with James Brown at the Taj in '93. A lot of James Brown fans I know online sort of like that photo. To some degree, even the birthday book is just sort of solidifying that they were friends. And it is important to point out that all this takes place before 2006, before the allegations really started to come out about Epstein, about the fact that he was being investigated down in Florida and then the aborted federal investigation. But the idea that he did not know him, we know he sort of severed their relationship in 2004 for a variety of reasons. But there's no doubt that these men were friends. And, you can talk to lots of people that they were there, they were socializing, they went to parties together. NBC had videos of them back at a party at Mar-a-Lago. So, I think in short, it still is a little surprising why the president has sort of made such a big issue about things like the birthday book, because it doesn't strike me as being surprising that he and other people who were friendly with Epstein at the time might have signed this.